I'm going to have to bend down a little bit so that I fit inside the camera frame. But this is my SWARTS sliding compound miter saw. It has a 2000 watt motor. It has a 305mm blade, it's 12-inch blade. It has a cut travel, so the width of the board that you could cut is at least 310mm. The depth of cut, I'm not sure exactly what the depth of cut is. It's at least 125mm. It's certainly more than I'll ever need. And this is an excellent saw. So this is my review of the saw, having owned it for over a year. So I'll give you my honest view. I've got no affiliation with SWARTS or anyone actually. So I'll give you my review of this, what I think of the pros and cons of it, and go through some of the features as well as some of the things I did to adjust it. So first thing to note about the saw is all of these parts, they are solid castings. So the whole thing weighs a fair bit, which is a good thing. As you can see, I still haven't got round to bolting it to my bench yet, which is, I definitely should bolt this down. But it's just that it's been sufficiently heavy, almost, not all the time, but sufficiently heavy that I haven't actually needed to. But it certainly should be bolted down, and I'll eventually get round to that. But it's on the whole, it's very well constructed. Just to give you some idea of the size of this saw, that is a 1 meter ruler. The saw has a laser which is activated by this push button on the handle. It's a toggle button, so you push it in, the laser is now on, it'll stay on until you push that toggle button again. The energizer for the laser is inside the handle, so you'll find that the handle will get quite warm if you leave the laser on. But it's not a problem, it doesn't keep heating up endlessly, it just gets quite warm, which is fine once you are aware that's the way it works. The saw has a standard guard arrangement so that you cannot access the guard, and you cannot press the saw down until you pull this lever to the side. So that's positioned so that it's great if you're right-handed, but if you just use your thumb to pull. Let's try and show you on the camera. Use your thumb to pull the lever over, and then it's free to come down and engage. The saw has the slide out guides on either side. There is also a stand available for it. I don't have that. I've just got it on this table which is on casters, which is fine for my needs. At some point I plan to eventually get around to building a mitre station for it, but I still haven't got to that yet. But this works fine in my workshop. The saw comes with these two clamps which can be fitted either side. So I've got a standard clamp that can, as I say, it can fit either side of the saw. There's one of those styles. I wish there was two of these. I suppose I could probably order a second one. But there's one of that style. As you can see, they can go either side. There's also this one which is very handy, or depending on what you're cutting, it's very handy. So the way this one works is it has a quick release. You can fit it to the approximate lengths with a quick release down. So again, that fits either side. So it can fit there. You can put your wood in there, clamp it, and then you tighten it up. As you can see at the back, there is a bevel guide, and you can adjust the bevel 45 degrees either side. One of the main reasons I bit the bullet and brought this saw was because I needed to cut some bevels. So initially that was important. I haven't had to cut too many bevels, so I don't usually require that feature, but it is useful when it's there. There is a bit of setup, so you'll have to look in the manual and have a look at the setup steps because you need quite a long Allen key to get in there and adjust that bevel to be perfectly 90 degrees initially. After that, I've found I haven't really had to adjust that, but that could be because I don't cut a lot of bevels. Just looking at the back of the machine, there is this star knob, which you need to reach around the back of. You need to reach around the back of the machine, and then you can just release that by hand to change the bevel angle, or to set it back to 90 degrees. Initially, I thought that was a drawback. The Bosch saw, for example, you can do that from the front of the saw, but then I found that I don't cut many bevels, so in fact I've found that has actually not been a problem. And also I have found it's not as difficult to reach around the back to this great big knob as I perhaps thought it might be. So I had thought that was a drawback, but in hindsight, for me at least, I found that to be no great problem. As you can see, there is a Mitre gauge on the front of the saw which goes either side of 0 or perpendicular, and there are positive stops at your typical angles. So the way this works is that first of all it's locked in place by this handle. After a year this handle's become a bit loose. I think I'll have to pop the top off here and tighten that up, but it doesn't actually seem to affect the operation of the saw. But that tightens and locks in that angle into place, which can be at any angle. So first you need to release that, and then you can see you have this lever which releases the positive stop. Once you push that down, I'll have to grab hold of the saw because I still haven't bolted it down. But then you can adjust it to either to one of those positive stop angles or to any angle. Now this is my only gripe, I suppose, with the saw, is that the positive stops are a part of the casting and they're not super accurate. Also, this lever that goes into the positive stop is made of plastic. So again, it has a little bit of give in it, which means that out of the box those were not accurate. And I found even when I adjusted it, the positive stops are not all that positive, I guess is the word. So instead what you need to do is you need to line this up to be precisely at 0, or use a set square, etc., to get it precisely at the angle that you want, because the positive stop will put it close but not right on. So that's I just find I need to actually, because I want it to cut accurately, particularly because this saw can cut a very long, very wide board. So I find that what I need to do is actually, I use the positive stop as to get it roughly at say whatever angle I want, but then I will actually check it, and then you can move it. If we release it in here, there's a little bit of movement in here, so you can move it so that it's right on that angle that you want, and then tighten it up. At that point it will then stay at that angle, which is fine. They did plan, apparently, after some feedback, they plan to change this and improve this positive stop so it would be a lot more accurate. So that was their plan. Last time I spoke to them about that, they thought that they had just needed to change this plastic stop to be a metal one, I gather. But then I think after further investigation they realized they were going to have to change this casting to make it really accurate. And to change this casting was going to cost them quite a bit in manufacturing. They would have had to sell a lot of saws. So I'm not sure what their plan is now, but they're certainly not going to be doing that in the short term anyway. So that's probably my only real gripe about this saw, is that I wanted it to be accurate, and it is accurate, but the positive stops are not accurate. So you need to adjust that. As I say, it's particularly important on this saw because it's got such a brilliantly great capacity width-wise, but that is going to obviously magnify any error. So you're going to need to, any time that you change that, if you want to set it back precisely at say perpendicular 0, then you need to check it and then make a micro adjustment and then tighten it. One thing I would do differently if I had this saw again is that I'm in a very humid environment here, and also we had a fan running that just blew dust everywhere, and dust settled on these rails, and then I went away for a couple of months and came back, and of course wherever there was dust sitting on these rails, it rusted. So I've had to, this is actually after it's been cleaned up, so if I had known that, I would have taken a lot more precaution to make sure that these were always well lubed and free of dust on these rails. I've managed to clean them up so that that doesn't affect the operation anymore. They've just been discoloured a bit. However, in hindsight, I should have taken a lot more care to make sure those were always free of dust and well lubed. So you may or may not have that issue. The saw has a depth stop, so this is adjustable, so you can adjust this depth stop here to whatever depth and then lock it in place with the little locking knob here, and it will come down and hit this plate here to stop at whatever depth that you require, which is really quite useful sometimes. I find that is not perfect in terms of the locking, so I find that after a while I need to just check. Certainly if I go away and come back the next day, don't assume that is not going to come unlocked, so just be aware of that. When my saw came, the laser was not well positioned. It was on the wrong side of the blade, from my perspective anyway. Also, I found that the screws for it were quite loose. Now in the manual it says that you cannot, or do not adjust the laser, but I rang up SWARTS and they said that's an error in the manual. The laser can be adjusted. You're going to have to be careful with adjusting it. Obviously you could make it a lot worse, so just be careful. So there's a small Phillips screw on either side. There's one you can see right there, and the housing for the laser has some slots, so it does actually allow a little bit of movement. So you can adjust it and line it up how you like it. This saw comes with one of these bags to collect dust, and this slides on the back of the saw. Not just this saw, but any of this equipment, I've found these bags to be next to useless, and I never actually used this bag. I simply cut the tie, plastic tie that was holding it onto here, and took the bag off. Throw that away. So, but I found this part here to be very useful, because this little fitting here is just right to fit inside a 50mm hose. So I have a 50mm hose on my shop vac, and this bar helps to prevent the hose from sagging when it comes out of the saw, so that just fits very nicely in there. And you can see it has a little rib there which works well for my hose clamp to fit on there, which I just tighten up, and then that just plugs into the back of the saw. Of course the main problem with any of these machines is that a lot of the dust goes out, not in the front of the saw, goes out to the back of the saw, but manages to escape the dust collection that's trying to grab stuff coming off the blade. But that's nothing unique to this saw. However, it does capture some of the dust, so that's what I've done. So that goes into my shop vac, and I've explained the setup of my shop vac in another video. it has a split fence, so the bottom part is all one casting, and then on either side it has this top part which can be adjusted. So you can have it back like I've got if you're cutting bevels. If you're not cutting bevels, you can actually move that further forward, etc. Unfortunately, these do not have any holes in them, which would definitely be a nice to have if they had some holes in them, so that you could attach your own. I have made my own zero clearance fence for small items. At some point, it'd be a good idea to create a zero clearance insert in here. And there's lots of videos on YouTube explaining how to do that, so at some point I probably should do that as well. But just for small items, I just knock this up with some melamine, and that works quite well. What I do is I simply position this roughly, bring the blade down so that it's fitting into that slot without rubbing it. So I make sure that that is going to fit in that slot, and then I simply have a clamp which I place over here to clamp that in place over to the fence. So that works well, provided the material that I want to cut is not too thick, because the fence on the back, you can't see from this angle, but the fence at the back is not this high, therefore this clamp has to be approximately in this position, which limits the amount of the depth of material that I can use on this, but it works quite well for small things. I'm not sure if you can see, or you probably can't see on the video, but that 100 tooth blade has cut a very smooth cut. It hardly even needs sanding. It's fantastic, and that, in the end of the day, if I was going to buy another saw, I was going to have to change the blade, because that's the kind of cut I want. But the SWARTS tool comes with this 100 tooth blade, and it's a very nice blade. It's worked very well with me. So even after a year of use, that is still a very nice smooth cut. One of the best things about this saw is not something I can show you. I was having some problems when I adjusted the fence, and I couldn't seem to quite get everything to be perpendicular, and I contacted SWARTS, and they helped me. They actually helped me over the phone after hours to follow the instructions in the manual and adjust it and get it dialed up just perfect. So that's service that I doubt you'll get from anywhere else. So I highly recommend the service from SWARTS. So that's my review of the SWARTS sliding compound miter saw. It's been great for me. In my research, I found to get anything that was better than this was going to be 2 or more likely 3 times the cost of this saw. Obviously do your own research, but it was definitely the best by far in that price bracket. As I mentioned before, that 100 tooth blade that comes with it certainly clinched the deal for me, and yes, I've been more than happy with it. As I say, the only gripe I've got really is with those positive stops, and needing to check if I change the mitre angle, I check that I've actually got the correct angle. Apart from that, fantastic, and I recommend it. back I have a 50mm hose with a clip, and this has got a nice little groove for the clip to fit into, so that fits very nicely in there. And then I just do the clip up